Lord of the Mysteries. Chapter 332. Notary Certificate. Very generous conditions. Klein almost couldn't believe his ears. Although the most valuable items are the Sequence 5 Beyonder characteristic and the powerful sealed artifact with special powers, the rest aren't too bad either. It's impossible for a Sequence 5 powerhouse to only have sealed artifacts provided by the organization, and if any one of the Sequence 6 Zombie and Sequence 7 Werewolf is retained, it will be a bountiful harvest. Klein leaned back and pretended to think, to suppress the sudden greed in his heart. Your conditions are indeed satisfying, he replied and immediately returned with a question. Who is Shaman King Klarman? What kind of information is recorded in his Book of Secrets? Merrick rubbed his temples and said, The Shaman King can both refer to a high sequence job and also represent an outstanding person who controls powers in the domains of darkness, the moon, and the strange, one who surpasses his peers. Klarman is the latter, and also the former. He was active in the southern continent during the early part of the Fifth Epoch, and then he completely disappeared. Maybe he was hunted down by the Church of Death or our secret organization, or maybe he died of old age in some unknown place. His Book of Secrets includes knowledge such as secret deeds, rituals, alchemy, astrology, symbolism, natural interaction, and so on. Even if an ordinary person gets it, they can become an expert in the field of mysticism. They can even rely on their own natural spirituality to accomplish a small number of Beyonder matters without taking any potions. Well, the price is that they will slowly become mentally ill. This is the aftermath of one's spirituality being unable to bear the burden. Sounds good. Just what I need. However, this mission is not only difficult in itself, but there's also a certain amount of subsequent trouble. I'm dealing with a secret organization with a history of over 1,000 years. Klein was silent for a few seconds, but he still chose to follow his heart. I wish to have some time to think it over. This is a very serious and dangerous matter. I can't be impulsive. I will give you my answer tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Come to my house. You know the address. He looked at Sharon while finishing the sentence. He suddenly felt nervous when he finished it. They had revealed so much important secret information, even problems that plagued them. If he didn't agree on the spot, would he be silenced? Or would they follow me until I make up my mind? Then, how can I go above the gray fog to make the divination? Sharon, who was wearing a black regal dress, looked at Klein quietly. There was no anger, doubt, or emotion in her blue eyes. She suddenly pulled out a folded piece of paper from a concealed pocket and unfolded it into a rectangle. The paper was orange-yellow, with many symbols, including those representing the sun. These symbols and labels drew out an empty zone, one which gave off a very warm and stable feeling. As soon as he saw the piece of paper, Klein remembered what it was and relieved his uptight heart. This was also from Numbleite Master Rosago. This was the Notary Certificate. Back when they were distributing the spoils of war, Sharon had taken this mystical item. The pale, delicate Sharon handed the Notary Certificate to Klein and said in a refined voice, Press your hand here. Promise not to divulge what you just heard. Phew! Klein exhaled and nodded seriously. All right. According to the prompt, he took the Notary Certificate and pressed his palm against the blank area. Then, after some deliberation, he opened his mouth and said, I promise I won't tell anyone what I just learned from Miss Sharon and Mr. Merrick. As he said each word, the symbols and magical labels around the Notary Certificate lit up, one by one, giving off a warm and bright glow. When it was all over, the light turned into a seal-like image that pressed down on Klein's palm and even passed through it, covering the blank zone. A warm current passed through him, and Klein felt a subtle but invisible connection between himself and the Notary Certificate. Back then, the ability mimicked by old Mr. Eye of Wisdom really does belong to a notary. He suddenly thought of something from before. I'm done. Klein returned the Notary Certificate. Sharon calmly nodded her head and didn't say anything else. Her indifferent figure quickly disappeared from the carriage. Merrick, still suppressing the malice in his eyes, tapped the carriage's wall with his finger. The carriage slowly stopped, and the door of the carriage opened. They're using zombies to drive the carriage and shadows to act as attendants. It really is Merrick's style. After activating his spirit vision, Klein took off his cap in enlightenment, pressed it to his chest, bowed slightly, and got off the carriage. It was a quiet street, one where several of the street lamps were broken, but no one had fixed them. Klein first went to his one-room apartment in East Borough before returning to 15 Minsk Street and pretended to make 2 divinations in the living room. The first time was whether or not he should accept this commission. The second time was whether or not it was dangerous, and how dangerous it was. As for the answer to the divination, he didn't pay close attention to it, because wraiths of the mutant pathway could transform into spirit bodies, allowing them to directly interact with the spirit world to obtain information. In other words, they naturally possessed the power of divination and anti-divination, so regardless of whether it was Sharon or the target Steve, the revelation that Klein received was either wrong or deviated. After he finished his divination, he read the newspapers and books, as he usually did. He practiced his Beyonder powers in the activity room, then he washed up and went to sleep. There was nothing abnormal about it. At 4:10 in the morning, Klein suddenly woke up and jumped out of bed. He found a candle, built a wall of spirituality, and quietly began the ritual of summoning himself. Then, he took 4 steps counterclockwise and went above the gray fog, but he was in no hurry to respond to the prayer. Sitting in the high back chair belonging to the Fool, Klein focused on the surface of the long bronze table. He saw the all-black eye, Azek's copper whistle, the Black Emperor card, and the dark, majestic figure of Roselle holding a scepter. The corner of his mouth twitched, and Klein stretched out his right hand to turn the card of blasphemy upside down. What I can't see can't hurt me. After conjuring a pen and paper, he took off his topaz pendulum and repeated his first 2 divinations. The result of the first divination rotated clockwise at an adequate frequency. That was to say that the commission should be accepted, but it also wasn't necessary. The result of the second divination was the counterclockwise rotation of the topaz pendulum, but it spun with great amplitude and frequency. Klein's interpretation was that there was danger, quite considerable danger, but it wasn't life-threatening yet as long as it was properly dealt with. Phew! After remaining silent for a few seconds, Klein remembered a hunch from before. Perhaps every magician needs to perform. Otherwise, the name of the potion would be Mage, not Magician. The key to never perform unprepared is to be prepared as well as to perform. And this may not just be in combat. The 2 assumptions of diverting the enemy's attention and getting the applause of the audience is predicated on there being a performance. As long as I can find the appropriate solution, disguise myself well, and deal with it perfectly, it will be hard for the Rose school of thought to find me. Many thoughts flashed through Klein's mind. Combined with the revelation he had just received from the divination, he quickly came to a decision. Leaning back against the Fool's high back chair, he raised his head to look at the towering ancient palace and the boundless gray fog and revealed a slight smile. Then, let's have a grand performance. With that, he took the all-black eye and Azek's copper whistle and responded to his own prayers. The next morning was a Thursday morning. Klein, who had bought the ingredients early, prepared homemade Fenepotter noodles, which was closer to the noodles mixed with meat sauce. He went to the door to take out today's newspaper from the mailbox. As he ate, he found a notice of a Beyonder gathering in the Backland Morning Post. As expected, once the tense situation is resolved, the gatherings begin. Klein smiled and said to himself. At 9 o'clock, he took out his golden pocket watch, opened it, and took a look. Then, he faced the empty living room and said to the Oreo window, I'm willing to provide help. The conditions are exactly as you said. But that's only if you give me a few more days. He paused for a moment before replying with a smile. I need to make some preparations. Other than Klein, there was no one else in the living room, but suddenly, an illusionary voice rang out. Okay. After you've finished preparing, you can pay the bar a visit. In Viscount Glan's study, Audrey was sitting in a chair, helping Susie straighten the fur on the back of her head. She said to Furs and Zio, who were sitting quietly beside her while sipping their wine, "Why were you in such a hurry to bring me here?" Although this was the first time she had seen Furs and Zio since the incident with Lenevis, she had already paid them through Susie. Well, after joining us at the Tarot Club, Furs seems to remain unchanged. She's still languid and fond of being snide with Zio, but there are some things about her that are completely different. She used to be dispirited, depressed, and she seemed to hold little hope for the future, but now, that aspect has completely disappeared. Audrey, the telepathist, smiled faintly and observed the state of Miss Magician with a calm heart. After downing the rest of the red wine, Furs said, "It is indeed Ormer, the most famous red wine. It's much better than the ones I've drunk before. The level is very clear and each level has a different feeling." She put down her wine cup and said, "The gathering that might have the spectator and clues to the psychology alchemists will be held this afternoon. Is that so? Why the rush?" Audrey asked, puzzled. Furs explained with a smile. "Because the serial killer has wasted too much of everyone's time. Moreover, that's the outskirts of Northborough. It's during the afternoon when the Nighthawks are most relaxed." "Okay." Audrey nodded lightly and didn't ask any further. At the same time, her gaze swept across the room, and she sighed silently. Compared to the past, Zio is a lot quieter compared to the present Furs. At that moment, Viscount Glank chuckled and said, "Audrey, I will go with you." "Why?" Audrey asked despite knowing the answer. Glank cleared his throat and said, "It's because I've already obtained the apothecary formula. All I need to do is trade for some ingredients. My vault doesn't have the 2 corresponding ingredients." "Oh, Furs sold it to me. £300. She guarantees that it's authentic." £300. I remember that you bought it from Mr. World for only £230. Audrey couldn't help but glance at Furs.